What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we're going to be doing something super sick. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking out every version of the Dean from Hell that's been made by either Dean guitars or Washburn guitars. Here we go. So it's not every day where you see all of these wicked guitars right behind me, and there's a special one off camera that we will talk about later on. It's not every day that you get all of these guitars like just in your living room. This is a blend of guitars that are mine and guitars that are owned by some of my friends. So I do got to shout out my friend Ryan and Justice, who actually needed me to work on their guitars and basically just made this whole thing happen, which is pretty insane. So thanks guys, I really do appreciate you letting me hang out with your guitars for a little bit longer. But anyways, those guitars need a little bit of work and they're all here at the same time. So I thought, why don't we just throw these all together, hang out with them, and let's just see what every version of the Dean from Hell is kind of gone through in terms of like aesthetic changes, the fit, the finish, the feel, and everything like that. Let's just see how much it's changed, and let's celebrate Darrell's legacy, and let's talk about one of the most iconic guitars that's ever been in rock and metal. Alright, so let's take it all the way right to the beginning, and we're going to start with literally the guitar that it all started with, which is the original Dean from Hell, and that is based on a 1981 Dean ML Flame Series, which is kind of like this, because this is also a 1981 Dean ML Flame Series. The Flame Series indicates that it was just a bit of a basic guitar, didn't have any fancy wood tops or anything, didn't have body binding or anything like that. Still a quality guitar, it was just a bit more of a budget-friendly version while still being made in the United States. And this one here, a very cool thing about this one is that this guitar was made roughly 1 month, if not maybe a little bit less than a month, before the actual Dean from Hell. This guitar has a mahogany body. We got the original Bill Lawrence XL 500 in this, just as Darrell would have had. Super distortion in the neck. There probably would have been an actual DiMarzio super distortion in the bridge here as well. Dean Guitars back in the day was the first manufacturer to use aftermarket pickups as a standard feature on their guitars. We have the string ferrules because this was actually a string through bridge, later converted to have a Floyd Rose bridge, as you can see right here. We then have the routing on the back, and then again with the original string ferrule. And same thing like the original Dean from Hell, it started out as a hardtail guitar and then was converted to have a Floyd Rose, and then obviously repainted to that iconic Dean from Hell logo that we all know. We do have the traditional Dean V-shaped neck. This is a very sharp V-shaped neck. This is the sharpest V-shaped neck I've ever played, and by comparison to the other Dimebag guitars that we are going to be checking out today. And I'm going to get some close-ups as well on this guitar, but this guitar has been played many, many times, and as you can see with some of the patina on this guitar, some of the dings and the battle scars, it's been through a lot, but it still sounds great. It's a fantastic guitar. Overall, the guitar feels very well built. This is a very solid guitar. This guitar still feels and sounds fantastic for literally being over 40 years old, which is crazy to think of. So let's plug it in, let's hear this thing. Unfortunately, Dean and Dimebag's time was cut short due to Dean Guitars more or less going out of business, or at least taking a hiatus from building guitars, and eventually getting bought out by a parent company as far as I remember. But around this time, Pantera was blowing up to be one of the biggest bands in metal, and within all that, Dime obviously needed some more guitars. The only way he was getting Dean guitars is by finding them in pawn shops, because at that time, no one wanted those old Dean guitars. So Dime would just go to pawn shops and pick them up, but it was then turning into, I need more guitars to do my job. And with Dean Guitars shutting down, they really weren't able to do that. Then entered a couple different brands. You probably know the Hammer from Hell. There was a couple BC Rich prototypes, and there was some other prototypes from other brands. But the one brand that stuck out, and the one that is probably my favorite, and the one that's a little bit most synonymous with his signature guitars, is gonna be the Washburn Dimebag Darrell signature. And what we have right here is a 1998 Washburn D3 Dime bolt, and this is an all-American made in the Chicago custom shop that all of those USA Washburns were made in. And look at this thing. This thing is sick. This was one of my white whales, one of my holy grail guitars. I have a couple D3s, but this one, especially with the bolt pattern, it seemed like it was changed a little bit from the original Dean from Hell to make it a little bit more aggressive. Like, this thing just stands out. It looks so killer, and I always remember watching the home videos and seeing the D3 bolt, like this guitar here, and seeing a couple of 90s Guitar World magazines with the print ad of the D3 bolt in it, and It was just like the guitar that I've always wanted, next to some other iconic Dimebag finishes, of course. But the thing is that the D3 is very similar to a Dean ML, although there are some differences, and I will highlight those in a different video. But legally, in order for Washburn to make this shape, they had to change roughly 20% of the actual original D&ML shape to avoid copyright issues and to avoid some licensing issues and things like that. So yes, even though this guitar looks very similar to the original D&MLs, this guitar is on paper and documented to be actually 20% different than the original ones. So yes, they are two different guitars. With all of those technicalities out of the way, we have a lot of similar features between all of these guitars. We have a Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge. We have a Floyd Rose bridge. We have a mahogany body. Something else that's very unique about this guitar is that this guitar also has some body binding. It's actually hiding a piece of maple that is on the guitar. So it's a mahogany body with a maple top that's laminated on, and obviously it's just painted over. Some of the other guitars might have a flame maple top like the Dime Slime, but this one here has a nice piece of maple on it, covered up with this really sick lightning bolt paint job. Mahogany neck as well. And in true Dean and Dimebag guitar fashion, we have the V-shaped neck here, and Dime did really like the V-shaped necks. Some of the other Dimebag guitars through the years kind of had some C-shaped necks, and you know, those ones really weren't my thing, and I believe those weren't really Dimebag's thing either. But these V-shaped necks, they're just so synonymous with these Dimebag guitars in my opinion, and to play a Dimebag guitar without that V-shaped neck just seems kind of off in my opinion. We also have a giant volute on the back of the headstock, which is to reinforce the headstock so the headstock just wouldn't break, because if you know, the original headstock on that Dean from Hell broke many times, and this was a way to kind of remedy that. The guitar was kind of redesigned to have a Floyd Rose right from the factory, rather than being an aftermarket addition to a hardtail guitar. This guitar is sick, they're super rare. I barely see any of these pop up on the used market, and when these guitars do pop up on the used market, they do command a pretty good price, so that's just a little bit of a fair warning there. I'm lucky and very privileged to own this. If you can get the chance to play one, just do it. These are extremely quality guitars. It's legitimately one of the best sounding and feeling guitars I've ever played, and it sounds absolutely crushing when you plug it in. So let's do that. So during Dime's tenure with Washburn, which lasted around 10 years, there was a lot of different Washburn Dimebag guitars that were in production. We obviously have the D3 that I just covered. We also had the import line, which was the 333 and the 332, and I think there was also the 331 and a couple other variants in there as well. Those guitars were the volume seller to kind of get in the hands of some kids, or get in the hands of maybe people who were on a budget and wanted to still have a Dimebag specific guitar. So now within all that, there was actually a very special version of the 333, or the import line of guitars, that was released when Dime was with Washburn. Now this guitar is sort of related to the Dean from Hell. The reason being is that Dime actually sent the original Dean from Hell into Washburn and talked with one of their master builders to try to get him to recreate the essence and the feel of that original Dean from Hell in a new guitar with a new shape. After the guitar was built and a couple prototypes went back and forth, Dime said that he was floored and that the spirit and the essence of that original Dean from Hell was captured in this guitar. And that guitar is the Washburn Culprit. So now this guitar is a bit of an oddball. Now when I compare this guitar to like the Dean from Hell and the Washburn D3 that I own, and some of the other D3s and the Dean USA guitars that I've played, this guitar doesn't really feel like any of those ones, which is very interesting. Maybe Dimebag's actual Culprits felt like the Dean from Hell, but this one doesn't at all. And it's not like it's a bad guitar, it's just this doesn't feel like the Dean from Hell. So if there's anyone who's looking for one of these things and you're thinking that you're going to be getting the Dean from Hell, you might be a little disappointed. But the thing is, this guitar, if you don't think of it as trying to be a Dean from Hell, this thing is sick. Even though it kind of looks like a bottle opener on the bottom here, like it's this weird kind of hand-drawn explorer like hybrid thing that Dimebag designed. Pretty sure he drew this thing on a napkin, and out of nowhere the Washburn Custom Shop built this thing for him. There's only a handful of these guitars floating around on Earth, and there's 52 in red, and I have one of the 52, and there's 52 in black. And Dime was a huge fan of gambling, so I believe the legend has it is that there was 52 red, 52 black, 52 cards in a deck of cards. You know where we're going with that. So yeah, that's a really kind of a neat thing, and Dime had a lot of those little Easter egg moments with his guitars, which was really sick as well. This is a made in Korea Washburn Culprit, so it's made in the same factory, the same Samick factory as the Washburn 333s for the most part. All of those Washburn and the Dean guitars that we are going to be covering in today's video, outside of this, have a Gibson style scaling. So that is 24 3/4. Now this guitar has a 25.5-inch scale. This upper horn is a little bit more angled and a bit more off, kicked out by comparison to the other Deans and Washburn like ML D3 models. Big old like hockey stick 6-in-line headstock, which is again very different from the traditional 3/3 V headstock. This headstock is something Dime didn't really want initially. When he was switching from Dean to Washburn, and he was going through all the different guitar manufacturers, he wanted a company that could make basically the Dean from hell. So seeing this on a Dimebag guitar is pretty interesting. And another thing is that there's nowhere on this guitar where it says Dimebag. It just says Washburn, and kind of if you know, you know. This guitar also had some stock pickups that were kind of okay. I changed the bridge to a Bill Lawrence XL500. I changed the bridge to an original Floyd Rose because the original bridge on this guitar just had some tuning issues, and I wanted to alleviate that. So new Floyd Rose on here, and that's something I do recommend that you do with any of your import Dime guitars if it's not already been done. That's going to really help with tuning stability and putting a Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge. Otherwise, on paper, this guitar is kind of similar in terms of the bones. We got a mahogany body, mahogany neck, rosewood fingerboard, nickel frets, and that's kind of where a lot of the similarities more or less end, outside of, you know, 2 humbuckers, Floyd Rose, and a 3-way toggle selector. That's kind of it. Now, unfortunately, this model just didn't really sell. It was released from 1998 and kind of stopped in around 2002, again with only 104 pieces total, maybe a couple more or less. And with no real marketing from Washburn on this guitar just unfortunately flopped. And it's too bad because it is a really sick guitar. It's probably one of my better playing like extreme shape guitars. And it's too bad this shape never really took off because it is something that's very cool and very unique, and it is still a Dimebag shape, but you know, maybe this guitar will have a second chance at life in the near future. So now moving from the late 90s to the early 2000s, we then see a lot more Dimebag guitars getting produced and a lot of special finishes as well. I'm going to do my best to show a few examples of them on screen, whether they are 333s or whether they are Dimebag USA Washburn guitars. And within that 10-year relationship, Dimebag had a lot of really special guitars that actually never saw the stage for whatever reason. And you could see some of those guitars in the home walkthrough that Attila and Ola Englund have respectively on their channels. So within that time, people come and go from different guitar manufacturers, and there was a lot of people who came and went from Washburn, and there was a lot of people that, you know, went that really formed those initial relationships with Dime and brought him into Washburn. So within that, and you know, a contract renewal coming up, Dime chose not to renew his contract with Washburn, and there's a lot of people who were caught off guard with that. So all of the remaining orders for USA and import Dimebag guitars were fulfilled, and there was a couple other ones that kind of got out there later on. That'll be for a different time. And just to touch on an earlier point, if people are leaving guitar companies, they're usually going with the person that brought them there, and because they have a personal relationship with that person. And case in point here, Dean Zielinski came back to Dean Guitars, and Dean Guitars was kind of coming up again, and of course, Dimebag caught wind of this, and the rest is history as we know it. And when they rejoined, they had a lot of sweet guitars, but the one that stood out to me and the one that I always wanted for such a long time was one guitar that a lot of people thought was never going to come back into production, which is the Dean from Hell. And now this is a 2005 made in America Dean from Hell. This is one of 150. This is the original run of the Dean from Hell. This was supposed to be a signature guitar for Dimebag Darrell, and due to the unfortunate events of December 8th, 2004, when Dime was taken from us, this guitar turned from a signature model to a tribute guitar. This guitar, and pretty well every Dean guitar that was a Dimebag signature model, thus became a Dimebag tribute model to honor the man's legacy. And yeah, this is a sick guitar. This is like something I've wanted like forever. This is a guitar I literally had posters of in my room growing up, and literally all those posters are now in my studio room. Just as a bit of a full circle moment of like, you know, look where you've come. You've got the very guitar that you've been dreaming of and the guitar that you literally had posters of in your room as a kid. Yeah, this guitar is one of my favorite guitars. It's a very great playing guitar, great sounding guitar. It feels so good to play, and just the attention to detail on these USA Deans and just the Dean guitars from like the early to mid 2000s, just such good guitars. And if you get the chance, go ahead and play one. Or if you get the chance to buy one and it's not gonna really break the bank, like just jump on these things. Like the quality is just through the roof on these guitars. But yeah, super happy to have this thing, and again, you know, carry the legacy of Dime in some way, shape, and form. Really, really sick guitar. Let's plug it in. So just like Washburn, Dean also had the import line of Dimebag guitars, and there was a ton of finishes on those guitars as well. But the most consistent one that was been produced for the entire run of the Dean guitar Dimebag signature line was going to be the import Dean from Hell. Now this guitar was made in 2006, and they were predominantly made in China. And I gotta say, if you only have the money for one Dimebag guitar and it's, you know, the USA is out of your budget, this early Chinese, like, Dean from Hell is really good. Like, it's very close to the actual American Dean from Hell of 2005. And I will say, you do have to do a few things to it. You know, upgrade the bridge if you're having tuning issues. You do have to upgrade the neck pickup since it's just a regular Dean neck pickup. The neck pickup actually sounds pretty decent, but if you want to get it to that USA Dime spec, you do have to change that. Otherwise, like, this thing is pretty dialed in right from the factory. Like, production did change. They went to Korea for like a couple years. These guitars and a lot of the other Dean import guitars were then made in India, and I've played some of those ones and they feel okay, but if you find one of these early ones, like, they feel quality, they sound really great, and there's no real issues with these things. So really consider one of these early 2006 Dean from Hells if you are on a budget and you want the Dean from Hell look. So at this point we've covered pretty well every guitar, but we have one final one to cover, and this is one of the last USA Dimebag guitars, or at least the last USA Dean from Hell. And this is the 2015 commemorative edition Dean from Hell. There was a lot of other USA Dean Dimebag guitars. You had the Far Beyond Driven, the Primal Concrete Sledge, and you had a couple other models in there as well. And this model, and just like the other ones that I listed, were built a little bit more closely to Dimebag's original Dean from Hell. As you can see, we have the top-mounted Floyd Rose on the 2015 model. Bill Lawrence XL in the bridge. We had the super distortion in the neck, all mahogany throughout, rosewood board. Once again, this is a bit more close in feel, especially with the top-mounted bridge. Your hand sits a little bit differently, it sits higher up. I'm pretty sure at this point in Dean Guitars history, they were able to actually scan the original Dean from Hell and some of those other original Dimebag Darrell guitars and get these production models as close as they could to the original ones in terms of fit, finish, and certain build deployments, especially when you got the actual top-mounted Floyd Rose here. The Dean from Hell that I have, the 2005 one that has a recessed Floyd Rose, has a bit of a different feel. It doesn't change the sound too much. There's going to be a little bit more wood cut out of the guitar just so the bridge can sit a little bit lower, but otherwise, that's kind of like the main difference between this one and the one that I have here. This one's also pretty cool. It actually says the Dean from Hell right up on the headstock here. We still have the same V-shaped neck. This one and basically all the other V-shaped necks that we've talked about today in terms of these guitars, they're not as pronounced as the original 1981 ML that we started out this video with, but these are still some pretty nice comfy V-shaped necks. There's a couple differences, and I've outlined this in some earlier videos on the channel comparing this version of the Dean from Hell to some other ones as well. Just for a real quick one here, the lightning bolt paint job is a little bit more aged, and I think it's a little bit thinner on this one here. And as always, the Dean USA stuff built very well. A lot of attention to detail here. They feel really good. They sound killer as well. And if you do get your chance to play a USA Dean guitar, you're going to be very, very impressed with how great these guitars are. Now obviously I wasn't able to showcase every literal Dean from Hell on earth because that's actually just impossible, and of course being able to share the real deal with you all is, you know, that's not in the cards at this point in time. But what we have here is just a representation of the Dean from Hell, where it started from, where it's gone through, all the changes in between as best as I could show it. And of course we're missing a couple guitars. I don't have an actual Washburn 333 Dime bolt to showcase for you all. I don't have maybe a few other Dean from Hell versions. But the fact that we can get all of these guitars all into the same room is pretty insane as it is. And in case anyone doesn't know, like, you can't buy these guitars anymore. These are discontinued. The Washburn guitars have been discontinued for a very long time. And yes, there have been some other Washburns that have kind of surfaced after, like the Funky Monkeys, the Boogie Streets, and things like that. Those are all legit models. They do have their own story, which we will talk about in another video. There have been some counterfeit models coming in. There has been some weird, like 2014 Washburn D3s that have like kind of been built in Indonesia and things like that. Dean Dimebag guitars have been discontinued for the past while since the Dimebag estate has left Dean Guitars, and also Dean Zielinski has not worked for Dean Guitars, the company that he founded, for quite some time at this point. So now a lot of that has us wondering, like, well, what is next? And obviously what's next is that there is another guitar line coming. We don't really know what's going to be going on with that company right now. There is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in terms of, like, you know, starting a whole new product line and things like that. And there's also other stuff that's going on as well in terms of, you know, getting this kind of guitar rolling and getting these guitars out. I know there have been some teaser pictures of some guitars from this brand coming up, and we just need to see what happens because nothing's finalized yet. I'm really excited to see what's going on with the new line of Dime guitars, and honestly just to see the new wave of Dime guitars and just to carry the legacy for the current generation, the upcoming generation, and just everyone in general who loves Dimebag's playing, his music, and the way he approaches guitar, because He's impacted all of us in some way, shape, and form. He's left a lasting impression on all of us as we are still talking about his playing 20 years after his passing, and even when he was in his peak as a player, and even through the height of Pantera, he was on top for a lot of us, and we're still chasing that tone. We're still playing the solos, and we're still learning the riffs, and at the end of the day, we're still keeping the spirit alive, and I think that is the most important thing at the end of the day. You know, there's some new stuff coming in down the road, and I'm excited to see it, and I'm excited to, you know, get some stuff on the channel, and I'm excited to do more things like we just did in today's video, like showcasing guitars with you, and, you know, just building community and keeping the spirit alive, because that is what it's all about, and that's what I want to do here, and, you know, make this a good place for people to learn and have some fun and get a little bit of entertainment value out of it, as well as keeping the spirit alive for Dimebag for many generations to come. And that's going to do it for today's video. Once again, big shout out to my friend Ryan and Justice for allowing me to hang out with their guitars for a little bit longer after fixing them for them, and just being able to make this video happen. If you have a favorite guitar that we talked about or that I showed on screen at some point in the video, let me know in the comments below. I love reading the comments and I love engaging with you all and, you know, building this kind of community here to keep Dimebag's spirit alive. If you like the video, make sure you slam that thumbs up button. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I have tons more Dimebag and Pantera related content on the channel. I'm going to link a playlist as well. You can go check all of that out. And if you really like what I do, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.